Welcome to Money, Manifestation, and Business, the podcast that shows you how to use your energy, intention, and consciousness to reprogram your money mindset, unleash a new level of possibility, and create a life and business that lights you up. I'm your host, Jamie Berman, and I invite you to join me each week for a dose of inspiration, coaching, and teachings to help you rewrite your money story, create abundance on your terms, and grow your business in a way that's fully aligned for you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. Hi, friend. Today, I'm going to talk about something very fun and exciting, which is how to keep your manifestation, how to hold it, how to stay in the frequency of maintaining, right? And actually, this is kind of fun. So I was trying to get some ideas for episodes. I usually have lots of ideas, but I was like, what do my clients need right now? So I reached out to my clients in the Money Manifestation Movement in our Facebook group, and I said, hey, y'all, what do y'all need support with right now? What do you want me to do a full-on solo episode about? And I had several people who responded and said, Jamie, dive deeper into how to maintain this manifestation, right? They're like, I manifested it. I did it. I created it. Now I'm in the space of how to hold it, how to have it, how to maintain it. And I know this very well. This is work that I have personally done with every quantum leap that I've had, with everything that felt like a big manifestation that I had been holding for a long time and that came to life. I have done this work around of not only manifesting it, but creating safety around having it, believing and trusting that I could keep it and that I was someone who could be responsible with it and hold it, right? So this is something I'm very familiar with. And I think it's so worth talking about on the podcast because we do see a lot around manifestation and how to manifest and how to create money. And I talk about it all the time. But this is a topic I don't think that's been touched on very often. And that is why we see oftentimes people who have massive quantum leaps in their life. And I'm talking those kind of quantum leaps that create a big identity shift for someone who maybe isn't energetically ready for that thing, right? They don't hold it. That is why studies show that 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt within 3 years. That's wild, right? I think that goes to show you that there is a piece that has to do with our mindset, with our identity, with learning how to have and to hold something that is very important and a big piece of this. You also see it oftentimes with like bands or singers where they'll have one massive hit and it'll explode and it'll go viral and it's everywhere. And then, they have that one song, but they can't seem to recreate it, right? They can't hold it. And for some people, maybe it's like they consciously chose they didn't want that. But for others, it might be just, oh my God, how do I recreate that thing? How do I have it? How do I hold it? So we're going to dive into this today. And I'm only talking about this because I think it's super helpful to learn these things ahead of time or practice these things in the process. And I want to say, this is not to make you fear creating your manifestation or not to make you fear having a quantum leap. It's more like, hey, let's be aware that there's also going to be a process afterwards where, we are shifting our self-concept, we're shifting our identity, and there's some practices that we can do to practice having and holding it. And that is what I'm going to talk about in the episode today. And also, side note, you may have noticed my voice sounds a little different today. I have a cold, but you know what? I am committed to getting this podcast out there to you. And I was actually so excited about the topic that it lights me up and helps me. I totally forget that I even have a cold. So, all right, let's dive in, y'all. Okay. So the first thing is, in order to keep what you have manifested, the first thing and maybe most important thing is don't be attached to keeping it, right? And this is so interesting because what else do I teach about manifesting it? Whenever we're manifesting something and when we're actively creating it, we don't want to be attached to having to have that thing in order to manifest it. It is the same for keeping it. We don't want to be so attached to keeping it. Now, attached is different than desiring keeping it, than wanting to keep it, right? That is different. It's different than intending to keep it. Being attached to keeping it means that we're telling ourselves things like, this thing is creating my safety and security, and it's really important, and I'm not going to be okay if I don't have it, and I have to keep it. The energy around attachment is, this thing is so important. We almost put it on this pedestal that makes us, right, when we're attached, we're like so afraid of losing it. We think it's so important to keep it. And we place a lot of attention and energy and focus on keeping it. So much so that we are in fear around it. That is not helpful. That's not going to help you maintain it. You have to remember that you were okay before it, right? You're okay with it, and you're going to be okay maintaining it. And even if it were to go away, you're going to be totally fine. There's a looseness around it. You want to feel loose around this thing because that's the only way this thing can breathe. Otherwise, you're putting pressure on yourself to keep it. And that is not going to actually help you keep it. Right? So, what I would say, first of all, is ask yourself, if you have created something new, if you've manifested something new, is there any part of you that's like, I have to keep it, I have to maintain it, and this energy around it that's not helpful? If so, you want to loosen up that energy. You want to remind yourself that this thing is not creating your feelings. This thing is not creating your safety or your security. Yes, you love having it. Yes, it's nice. Yes, it's wonderful, but you would also be okay without it, just like you were okay without it before, right? So stop placing so much importance and attachment on keeping it, because that, in fact, will not help you keep it. That is what is going to push it away. That's what's going to cause you to go into fear. Right? So I would really recommend releasing that. And you might have to do some inner work in order to release the attachment around it. You might have to look at, what am I making this manifestation mean? Why am I placing so much importance on it? Why am I telling myself I have to have it? I have to keep it? And how can I shift my energy around this in a way that feels more loose, feels more fluid? Because that's what's going to allow this thing to actually stay, right? Because I hear, or have not only hear about this and have coached tons of people around this, but I have personally experienced this where I've been so attached to keeping something. For instance, like when I've made a certain amount of money and I was like really working on, stepping into the identity of someone who's responsible with that money and someone who can take care of it. But I was so attached to it that I had this fear of losing it, right? And that fear of losing it kind of consumed me for a while until I recognized that was what was going on. And in fact, when I had so much fear of losing it, I would only notice whenever I took some out or whenever I wasn't making the money that I wanted to for a certain month. And I was kind of focused on all the wrong things. I was focused on basically the opposite of what I wanted to create. So I was, quote unquote, negatively manifesting, right? I was manifesting what I didn't want. When we're in fear and we're thinking about what it is we don't want, we aren't focused on what we do want and creating what we do want. So that work is really important. And I've done that many times where I've had to release attachment, release the fear of losing it, and remember, come back to wholeness. I'm good with it. I'm good without it. And really get to that place where you feel that deep in your bones, because you'll be able to breathe and you'll be able to create from that place. You'll be able to create even more from that place where you can actually breathe. All right. The second thing that I recommend doing to practice having it is to celebrate it. So let me ask you this. If you've manifested something, how often are you actually recognizing that you have it? How often are you celebrating that it is there and acknowledging and expressing gratitude for the fact that you have it, right? Because so often, what we do, if we are attached, like I was saying, is we create that thing and then we don't even fully receive it. The first thing we do is get into fear of losing it. So we haven't actually acknowledged, I have this thing and I created this thing and I'm proud of myself for what I did to accomplish this thing, right? So, really important to celebrate it. Like, let yourself have it because you do have it right now. So, let yourself acknowledge that and really soak in the goodness of that. Now, whenever I say have it, that doesn't mean going out and spending it all or anything like that. That's not having it, right? Having it is acknowledging that it's there, acknowledging it and celebrating it and expressing gratitude. That's what it actually is to receive it, right? Is to celebrate it. So I would highly recommend, if you've created something amazing and you've manifested, really let yourself be in celebration around it and practice that consistently. Practice celebrating all of the things that you create, all of the manifestations. Not only that, but like make that a practice where you celebrate how far you've come versus looking at how far you want to go or versus looking at what you're afraid might happen. Like, let yourself have it. That's how you become an energetic match to keeping it. All right. The third thing is remind yourself that you created it. You don't have to understand how it happened. And this is what's wild. I always say, whenever it comes to manifestation, you don't have to know the how in order to claim that you want it, right? Whenever you're manifesting something, I always say, don't get stuck in the how because you can't possibly know how you're going to do it or how it's going to manifest, right? You can have a plan, but half the time the plan isn't how it actually manifests exactly, right? So you don't have to know the how in order to decide to go for something. You just have to decide it's what you want to manifest and then take one step at a time towards it. Well, what's also wild is that once you have it, oftentimes you couldn't answer how you created it, right? You could like come up with ideas of like, oh yeah, and I attracted this person and this person, or this came to me and it came through this. But there isn't no one streamlined way where you're like, this was the process exactly, 1, 2, 3. It's how I created it. So you don't have to know the how in order to manifest it. And then once you've manifested it, remember you created it, even if you don't know exactly how it happened, right? So I think sometimes what we get caught up in is that we don't recognize that we created and we feel like it was a fluke because we think, well, I don't know. It came through this and it came through this and it came through this and this happened and it doesn't make sense. It's not a 1, 2, 3 step process. So our brain can't really understand. So instead we think it's a fluke. It's not a fluke. You intended that thing into the world. You created it. You took one step at a time, right? So acknowledge the fact that you were the creator of it. No more telling yourself it was a fluke just because you didn't know the how. That's what's fun. It's like you don't have to know how along the way and you don't have to know how afterwards. All you have to know is you intended this thing into the world. You manifested it. You became a match for it, which means that you can do it again and you can do it again and you can do it again. All right. Now, I do recommend, this is a big one. If you are trying to, let's say, recreate it, let's say you had a really big launch and you want to have another really big launch, right? A really celebratory launch where you get all the right people in, you had one before and you want to do it again. I think it's important to stop trying to recreate it in the same way you initially did, right? Unless that feels aligned. But I think a lot of times we get so caught up in how did I do it? How did that happen? What did I do? What was the exact thoughts that I was thinking? What was the exact feelings that I was feeling? What actions did I take, right? And we're trying to recreate something that was already created. We're trying to do it in the same way and we get frustrated, right? And here's the thing is, no two creations are created exactly in the same how, and exactly in the same way. But it doesn't mean you want to stop creating. In fact, one of the best ways to hold and maintain your manifestation is just to focus on keep creating from here, right? Stop focusing on just maintaining your manifestation. Focus on creating. Get your energy into creating what's next, right? Creating more from here. What is the next evolution? Get your mind there. Go to expansion, not just maintaining, right? So, one of the best things you can do is to stop trying to recreate it in the same way you created it the first time and ask yourself, what do I want to create next? What's next for me? And what are some new ways that I could practice creating it? Because it's going to be different this time, right? Just like, what do I want to take maybe from the first time that I did it? What feels aligned? But how can I manifest from here? What's a new way of doing it? What's another way? What do I feel inspired to create right now? So keep creating. It's one of the best ways to maintain is just be in creation mode. Okay, another thing that I would practice is to work with any part of yourself that feels uncomfortable having this thing, right? So notice what's going on in your mind, in your body. Is there any part of you that's telling yourself, this is heavy, this is hard to handle, this is too much? Or I'm not responsible with this, or oh gosh, this feels uncomfortable. Like, notice any discomfort with having this. And you want to really look at that. What feels uncomfortable? And how can I make this more comfortable? Maybe it's with your mindset, right? Maybe it's the way that you're thinking about it. But also, maybe there's a way that you can get some support to make it more comfortable or to learn more about having this thing. For example, with money, right? Whenever I had more money, I actually wanted to hire a financial advisor to support me and helping me have it, right? This was a new thing that I was learning is how do I have this thing? So I hired support to help me learn, oh, wait, how can I keep this thing? How can I maintain it, right? And just notice what it, like I said, notice if there is any part of you that feels uncomfortable and how can you support that part of you that feels uncomfortable versus trying to push the discomfort away. Ask that discomfort, what do you need? What do you need to feel safe? Right? And take those actions, create safety for yourself around having this thing. It makes all the difference. And then the last thing that I'll say is just practice even visualizing or through your journaling, practice normalizing this thing, right? Where you keep reminding yourself, this is the new norm. This is normal now. This is what we have. This is what I have created. This is normal. This isn't some huge, massive thing. I've got this. It's normal. This is safe. I'm learning how to have it, right? And if you're going through some of that liminal space of learning how to be with it, that's totally fine. But just remind yourself, I'm normalizing this. This is my new norm. This is my new norm. And those practices will really, really help you. Now, if you have other practices that are helpful in terms of things that help create safety in your nervous system, do that. That is really the main thing is we want safety around having this thing, right? Because if we're feeling uncomfortable and if we're feeling unsafe, we're going to want to reject it. Our subconscious is going to want to get rid of this thing, right? So as much as you can, create safety. So whether that is doing somatic practices, whether that is doing thought work, whether that is doing breath work or EFT tapping or walking it out, walking out the energy, right? Whatever it is that you do, make that a practice and just know that, of course, anytime we create an identity shift, it is normal to go through some of that kind of liminal wobbly space of I'm learning how to have it. This is new for me. There's new things to work within this thing. There's new obstacles to overcome with having it, which is not something we're normally visualizing when we're manifesting it. but that's so normal. So just recognize that is normal. That's part of the process. And the more that you can work with your nervous system, create safety around it, release attachment, celebrate it, remind yourself that you created it, and work with any part of you that feels uncomfortable, it is going to make the process so much better. And last but not least, like I said, keep creating. Instead of focusing so hard on how do I keep this thing, focus on getting into creation mode. Enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the process. And that's what I've got for you today. So if you have manifested something, let me know of this episode. I would love to hear from you. What resonated? You can leave it in the review. I love to hear from you guys in the podcast reviews. That also really helps expose the podcast, which makes such a difference. You can also DM me on Instagram. I just love to hear what resonates for you, what's helpful. And I am so excited for you if you have manifested your thing and you are practicing this right now. What a great place to be in. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope this episode is something that you'll be able to add to your manifestation toolbox to come back to when you need a little extra motivation. If you like what you've heard today and want to take it deeper, you've got to come check out my signature coaching program, the Money Manifestation Movement. It's the place where you'll not only learn manifestation, but you'll begin to live it alongside me and an amazing community of like-minded entrepreneurs doing this work together. Head on over to jamieberman.com to learn more.